Alright, so I'm sorry that the screenshot button is the same button that for Bandicamp. But anyways, alright, information. Thank you for purchasing Derek's DLC. Here you can play 5 new moments centered around Derek. He also has a special epilogue in step 4. To unlock it, you need to fulfill these conditions. Play all of 5 of the Derek DLC moments, completing Sorry with Cove or by going alone is alright, so long as you finish that moment. Choose to remain in touch with Derek during step 3. Then you will have the option to play Derek's epilogue during step 4. You can only have one epilogue per playthrough. You can make a save on the epilogue selection page to reload and pick another later. Derek's DLC can be a friendship or a romance story. Okay, so this is Derek's DLC. We are going to play Responsible first. Let's go. Alright. The pool of Derek's condo complex was a perfect setting for a late morning outing. It was early enough that the day hadn't yet reached its hottest. The air still held the crispness of morning despite its pleasantness. Only you and Derek were there. Of course, given the location of the ocean, maybe everyone else who felt like waterside fun was at the beach, you usually were. The warm roughness of tiles felt odd on your bare feet as you walked further in the pool area. There was no sand to squish between your toes or sharp shells to avoid. You surveyed the area while Derek finished putting his stuff away on a chair. The chlorine was sharp in your senses, and the entire space was so orderly. Lounge chairs sat in neat rows, umbrellas spaced out uniformly. The depth of the pool was marked out in clear text along the sides. Every single element was intentionally and expertly crafted to be convenient for its human visitors. It was extremely different from the wild mistress of the sea. You liked the placid pool more, you liked the sandy beach with rolling waves more, you liked both the pool. You weren't a fan of either of the I'm personally not a fan of outside water at all. I think it's gross. I have a whole tangent about why it's gross. So we're gonna go with you weren't a fan of either this pool or the beach. Large bodies of water just weren't comforting to you, and you had just come to hang out with Derek, but you weren't going to complain out loud. Derek himself was very excited to show you the pool. This has been Derek's plan. He let you know about it ahead of time so you could be dressed for the occasion. You wore a wetsuit, you wore swimming trunks, you wore a two-piece swimsuit, you wore a one-piece. Let's wear a two-piece swimming suit. And a t-shirt, shorts, a shawl cover up. You were comfortable in that. We were comfortable with that. You're wearing swimming gear. Your swimming gear was familiar even if the pool wasn't. You felt prepared. Derek bounded up to you in his own swim trunks, flagrantly ignoring the no running signs in his enthusiasm. Watch, I'm gonna do a cannonball. As soon as he knew he had your attention, he took off to the deep end of the pool. He built up speed and then leapt into the water. His curled up body created a huge splash on impact. You laughed, you applauded, you smiled, you gasped, you dashed away from the flying water, you cheered. Let's cheer. Go, Derek! Even though he couldn't hear you from the bottom of the pool, you celebrated the show. He stayed under for a while longer. He touched the pool's bottom before he kicked himself back up. When Derek's head popped out of the water, he swam to the edge of the pool and propped himself up with a grin. He watched you expectantly. You jumped in the pool, you walked over to the steps of the pool to get in, you sat on the edge and dipped your feet in, you plopped yourself in it. Let's sit on the edge and dip our feet in. Sorry y'all, I have like a lot of allergies going on right now. It's literally every time I record, and also when I'm not. You settled yourself next to Derek, grimacing slightly at sitting on the damp concrete. Damp concrete is gross. Slowly you lowered your toes down into the water. The pool was comfortably cool after a moment of adjustment, a very nice treat after walking on the tile. As you enjoyed the moment, your thoughts fell back to how you've gotten here. Last night, Derek had called with a different sort of request. You remember that his voice had been a mix of nerves and hope. He had a favor to ask you, very unexpected for him. Derek's mom needed him to watch his little brothers in the afternoon. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary, but that was a part of his problem. Lately, he had feared that his sports skills weren't as sharp as he wanted them to be. He hadn't been able to practice soccer or football without the distraction of keeping an eye on his brothers. His idea to fix that had been to ask you for help watching the kids. if you agreed to go to the park with him and his brothers, and you could manage his brothers while he had a chance to focus on practice. That's how he explained it. You said yes, and your moms had been more than happy to let you spend the day playing support for Derek. They said it would be a good opportunity to take some more responsibility. To sweeten the deal, Derek suggested that you come by early so that you could both hit the pool. Nicholas would be sleeping in, and George could spend some one-on-one time with Mr. Suarez. So far, the plan had worked out. Ma dropped you off about 15 minutes ago, and both of Derek's brothers were fully occupied. Mrs. Suarez and George were back in the condo, putting together an 800-piece puzzle on the kitchen counter while Nicholas snoozed on the couch. You had time to kick back before the moment came to be in charge of small children. A sloshing sound pulled you back to the present. Derek had climbed out of the pool. I'm gonna jump again. Wanna join? Yeah, let's go. You sprung to your feet and reversed away from the edge until it seemed like enough room. Poised to go, you and Derek made eye contact. He leaned forward, balancing on the balls of his feet.
No worries.
I've already done one. It's your turn. You did a belly flop. You backflipped into the pool. You offered your hand to Derek so you could jump at the same time. You simply jumped in. You cartwheeled into the pool. You walked off the edge of the water. You showed a... Let's cartwheel into the pool. You positioned yourself carefully before springing into action. You ran, and then launched off on one foot while starting to rise your arms. The momentum carried into your body as you placed one hand sideways and then struck another, and then the other struck the very edge of the pool. For a split second, you were balanced on your hands as your feet tumbled through the air. However, instead of finding solid ground, you landed into the water with a great big splash. Wow. You stretched out and reached up towards the surface, parting your arms to paddle over to dry ground. Derek was laughing boisterously. It was his turn next. By the curve in his grin and the lift of his chin, he looked to be in the mood to impress. His eyebrows drew together in a deep furrow as he considered his launch. Derek took a few bounding steps to the edge, jumped up, and tucked his body in. Unlike his previous cannonball, the energy went into a spin. He flipped, making a full rotation before he crashed through the surface. The water droplets from the splash dazzled you as they exploded out from his impact. Sorry, y'all. He swam under the water and only came back to the surface after he reached the wall of the pool. He snaked his hands up to the top of the tiles and pushed himself up so that his hips were even with the edge. He twisted and practically rolled out of the pool from there. You're up. Okay. Let's offer Derek our hand so we can jump in at the same time. Oh. Derek accepted your hand eagerly and you ran towards the pool together. Whoa. You leapt and flailed your legs for a split second. Derek lifted your arms into the air and kicked a foot out before you landed in the water. You kept switching back and forth, trading off between silly jumps and then the more impressive tricks. From what Derek's well-practiced dives to performing your own jumps, there was never a boring second. After several leaps, Derek called a break time, and you took a breather at the back stairs to the pool. You waited for your strained heart rate even out from all the exertion. After a pause of silence, Derek spoke up. He pulled his fist to his cheek and thought, squishing his face slightly.
So,
Hey, I probably should have asked before, but have you ever babysat someone before? No, was that bad? No, but how hard could it be watching a couple of kids? Yeah, sometimes I babysit for my mom's friends. Does babysitting a dog count? Yes. We're gonna take her head. I've never babysat. He hummed, not sounding surprised. You were glad that he wasn't expecting you to have much experience. That's fine, it's not like I'm leaving you totally alone with them. I'll be right there if you need anything. You didn't know how you felt yet. You were prepared for it to be a pain, but you would do it for Derek anyways. You were curious to see how the experience would go. You felt nervous about being in charge. You were eager to take the job. I'm curious. Rather than dread or excitement, the coming afternoon was a mystery in your mind. You'd simply have to wait for it to arrive. After the interlude, you both continued to enjoy yourself and your freedom until a little beeping alarm went off. That's time. He made his way to the lounge chair with his stuff and dug out a small, portable clock. It buzzed until he found the stop button. Derek checked the time and narrowed his eyes at the glowing red numbers. He shot you a thumbs up.
let's go.
Let's go up. You helped him gather the towels, grab the rest of the stuff, and then try to drip as little as possible while rushing through the halls of the complex. When you reached his apartment, he dumped everything in his arms on the ground and scrambled to find his key. Just give me a second. I don't want to knock or anything in case Nicholas is still asleep. He finally spied his soccer ball keychain and snatched up his keys from where they were tangled in his towel. He inserted the key into the lock and the both of you shuffled inside the Suarez's home. 3 heads swiveled to face the 2 of you, gazes being drawn to the bundles of neon towels coming in. Mrs. Suarez and George were sitting on a bar stool, while Nicholas perched on the counter itself with an excited grin. They were working on a puzzle. On your left, Derek leaned closer and spoke under his breath. He's awake. Derek's back! Quick as a blink, Nicholas scrambled on his hands and feet and zipped across the black marble of the counter, tiny cardboard puzzle pieces scattered. Nicholas, the puzzle! Despite George's frustration, the little whirlwind didn't seem to hear. He was on a mission to reach his bigger brother, not even stopping when he hit the end of the counter. Nicholas stumbled off the edge and Derek instinctively moved forward with a gasp, dropping all his pool stuff except for the towel wrapped around him. Mrs. Suarez caught Nicholas with her forearms hooking under his chest, snatching him from mid-air. Oof! She hugged her son, holding him securely against her body. A chorus of relieved sighs filled the room. Nicholas still paid no mind to his trail of disasters and began to squirm. He just wanted down already. Derek took another few steps forward, making his way over to the scene. Mrs. Suarez carefully held Nicholas out, her hands under his armpits, and safely set him down on his feet. Nicholas immediately wrapped his arms around Derek's legs. Derek chuckled while tugging up at his towel so Nicholas wouldn't pull it off. Hold on, Nico. You're gonna get wet. Nicholas giggled mischievously and snuggled closer. Derek snuck a quick peek over his shoulder back at you and shrugged, just as warned. Nicholas now had a damp splotch on his shirt. You waited beside Derek quietly. Nicholas, I'm here too, you know. You asked George if his puzzle was alright. You told Nicholas he'd worried everybody. Hi, everybody. Let's just say hi.
Welcome.
Hello, welcome, Nori. George hummed something that could have been a greeting as he frowned at what remained of the puzzle. It was more than Nicholas, who gave no response at all. Well, Mrs. Suarez's tone was warm with a certain amount of humor to it. She rubbed her hands together and stood up. Derek and Nori are in charge now. Make sure you listen to them. George sourly picked at the puzzle pieces, but gave a grumbled noise to signify he had heard. I'm going to head off to my appointment. She went to gather some things, officially putting you and Derek in charge, but there wasn't 1 second to settle in your new position. We're going swimming? Nicholas looked up and stared with the huge shining eyes. Derek reflectively stiffened. How would he escape the puppy dog look? Derek's eyebrows creased, a small sign of nerves compared to the smooth, pulsating sound of his voice. No, even better. He leaned down and lowered his voice like he was about to share a secret. We're gonna go to the park. Nicholas instantly frowned. He wasn't convinced by Derek's act. He grabbed at Derek's towel. You were swimming. Yeah, but I'm not anymore. I'm going to the park and you can come with me. The little Suarez whined and stomped his foot. His hands balled up around the neon fabric harshly enough he almost took the towel from Derek. I want to go to the pool. I want to see Nori's swimsuit. What? Derek's jaw dropped. Neither of you were prepared for that one. Did you hear Nicholas right? You looked down at yourself, currently wrapped in a bright, fuzzy towel. You switched your gaze to Derek's youngest brother, your brain trying to make sense of what was happening. Why would you want that? Why does Nicholas want anything? George rolled his eyes and continued mumbling into the counter. It was obvious to him, and he couldn't believe the rest of you were taking so long to catch up. Because Derek does. You felt stunned. You couldn't help feeling amused. You suddenly felt extremely bashful. You only felt more confused. You didn't know what to feel. We felt bashful. That's embarrassing. Derek narrowed his eyes and whispered harshly, Nicholas, George, you're going to put me into an early grave. He took a deep breath and he stared at the ceiling. It took him a moment to face you. His voice was firm for someone at his level of embarrassment. I must have said something about hoping you'd remember to bring your swimsuit. I was excited for us to be able to swim, so I did want you to have one. Nicholas does not actually want to see you in a swimsuit. He doesn't even know why he'd want that. He's just saying stuff. You scratched the back of your neck as you focused on anything other than Derek or his family. The apartment had some nice plants. Pleasant, not plastic. And certainly not awkward plants. You snuck another look at Nicholas. He had crossed his arms high on his chest and squished his neck down far enough to rest his chin on his wrist. I want to go swimming. Ooh, one's a little terror. His pout intensified when he said it again. He was very angry. He was a very angry little baby. Derek tilted back on his heels, once again driven to look at the ceiling by straining of his kid. You glance up there yourself without thinking about it. It was a calm white color with a few light fixtures. When you squinted, you noticed something small and green. It appeared to be one of those sticky hands for kids. Was that another present from the youngest Saras? You tuned back into Derek. He appeared to have made a decision. Alright, I promise that you can go swimming too, but only after the park. We'll go to the pool as soon as we come back. With the promise officially made, Nicholas lit up. He snatched one of Derek's hands. Let's go, we gotta go to the park so I can swim. While Nicholas celebrated, Derek closed his eyes and some of the worried creases of his face smoothed out. Derek, there's a lunch packed in the fridge. Dad will be back before dinner. Gotcha. Thanks, Mom. Mrs. Saras waved and collected the last of her things, her purse off the side of the table. She ruffled George's hair on her way out. You and Derek were alone with the kids. We should really stop leaving puddles everywhere. He gestured at the drops of water pooling at his feet. He read my mind. You and Derek took turns changing. You went first, while you could faintly hear Derek impressing on his brothers to listen to you, too. You must have convinced them to behave for now, as neither George nor Nicholas acted up, while Derek took his turn drying off and clothing himself. Can you get our lunch from the fridge? I'm going to pack my gear. No problem. You walked casually to the kitchen. George hadn't moved from his bar stool ever since you'd gotten back. Meanwhile, Nicholas followed Derek like a possessed shadow that was even more energetic than the original. He zipped around occasionally, trying to place things in Derek's backpack for him. So far, Derek had said no to the rubber duck, but he had agreed to bring an extra pair of socks that Nicholas had determined were absolutely necessary. Okay, got everything. Derek returned with the backpack in one hand and Nicholas's small hand in the other. We're going, George. Ready? Nori? I was born ready. Sure. He pushed away from the counter and finally hopped off his chair with enthusiasm of plank wood. We're going! Derek hid a smile at Nicholas's echo and ushered everyone out. He locked the condo behind him and you began the trip to the nearby park. The park, for the Saras' boys, was the big park for your family. Their condo complex was only a short distance to the public outdoor recreational area your mom sometimes drove you to. It was still a beautiful day outside and had only gotten a few degrees warmer from your morning swim. The field was bustling with other groups of other people enjoying themselves. Derek led the way to a wide open part of the grass that no one else was using. He stopped in the middle of the field and turned 180 degrees to face the little boys behind him. He shrugged his backpack off his shoulders and dropped it to the ground. He kneeled down to root around inside it, George and Nicholas waiting in place for their brother. Derek gathered a couple of things in his arms before pushing off the ground with his knee to get up again. He held a football in his left hand and a soccer ball in his right. Alright, Nicholas, George, I've got practice, but you can too. Which one do you want? Football. Real ball. You raised an eyebrow at their shouts. Derek leaned over to you and whispered with a laugh. He means the soccer ball. It's real because it's actually ball-shaped. Is that the problem? They want both? Derek simply grinned. I thought so. He tossed George a football first. George caught it from out of the air with one hand and began to bounce it up and down in his fingers, feeling the weight of it. Derek popped the soccer ball gently over to Nicholas, who watched his brother intently. Nicholas had to catch it with both hands. He wrapped his arms around the ball and hugged it to his chest. And with his brothers taken care of, Derek crouched again to reveal a third ball. He brought a second soccer ball. Derek had been prepared. He then sprung back to his feet, another problem diverted. George, Nicholas, you can use this half of the field. I'll use the other half. Nori can be your ref, so don't get too far from her, alright? Okay. George tossed his football in the air, preoccupied it spun in the arc downward. Alright, I'm gonna practice. Nicholas embraced the soccer ball tighter, pressing his cheek into it. He wondered just how he had practiced with it when the equipment was about as big as his head. The child looked completely content with the world, but Derek's eyes narrowed once again. He shared some Nicholas information in your ear. Watch him. It's not over. He copies what I say, but it's not what he means. You snuck a peek at Nicholas. He appeared so innocent, clutching his ball and staring at a patch of clovers in the grass, but you had interacted with him enough to not question his potential trouble. You'd make sure to keep an eye on the kid. Don't worry, I got this. Thanks, Nori. You're a lifesaver. Derek held a soccer ball out in both hands and cheered. Bye, bros. Bye. Bye, bro. Derek put a Put on a smile as he picked up the bag, tucked the soccer ball under his arm, and jogged to the other side of the field. He didn't have time to lose. You stood with the younger Sarez boys, effectively turned loose. George stared at you with uncertainty, while Nicholas's mischievous smirk could only make you guess what he was thinking. You weren't going to make Mr. and Mrs. Sarez regret letting you come, and you especially weren't going to disappoint Derek. You were going to watch these boys. Time to be in charge. I'm going to play over there. He pointed vaguely to the opposite side of the field from Derek and trotted off to entertain himself. You let go of him. You let him go with the argument. George wasn't the problem child. While you saw him settle in, throwing around his football and chasing it, you smiled, but you would only need to manage Nicholas. You aimed your grin towards him, but instead of being in the clover patch, he was missing. You snapped your head back and forth until you spotted him fumbling, dash across the grass, struggling to keep his soccer ball from slipping out of his small arms. When Derek said watch him, he had really, really meant it. Your first babysitting gig started off with a bang. You ran over, Nicholas stopped, you ran over without a word. You ran over and picked him up, you ran over without a word. You were thankful for your longer legs since the kid was quick. You closed the gap between the two of you and stood in front of him. You didn't look up until he bumped into your leg. Nicholas snickered. He tried to dash around you, so you had to shift to the left to block his progress. He then went right, and you speedily sidestepped. Soon you were both going back and forth, as though you were actually playing a game of soccer, and Nicholas was trying to get past you to score. The soccer ball tumbled in his arms. And you were... okay, then you kicked the ball back to him and suggested playing. Oh, hey, Nicholas. You're hanging out with me just like Derek does. And you were just totally like, oh, let's do this one. Nicholas paused, finally interested. He raised one of his bushy eyebrows. You said the magic word, like Derek. He spends a lot of time coming to see me, remember? Now it's your turn to be the person to have fun with. Pretty cool. Nicholas's cheeky grin fell, but his eyes began to sparkle. He pumped one of his fists in the air. Yeah, I'm hanging out with Nori. With him cheering, you sighed in relief. You made a mental note. If you needed Nicholas's attention, just mention Derek. Let's go back to the clover patch. That's a nice place for hanging out. You led him closer to George, even if the middle Sarez could manage himself. He shouldn't be entirely alone. The only time your gaze strayed away from the little Sarez, was when you blinked or sent an occasional glance, at George's way. George continued to enjoy his time at the park without any need of assistance, so you spent most of your energy on the mischief maker, and after smoothing out the initial bump of the afternoon, things evened out. At least things were fine until the trial known as lunch arrived. It started with the reappearance of Derek. His presence sent Nicholas into a hyperdrive. He bounced on the tips of his toes and waved both his hands frantically. Derek's back! He tackled his older brother and latched around Derek's left leg. George, like half of the entire park, noticed the shout. He jogged over to see if any important updates were happening without him. Derek winked. Hey bros. Hi Nori. I hope you're doing alright. As he spoke, he let his bag drop to the ground. He crouched over it and scrunched up the packed lunches. It's all good. Oh yeah, it's just great. I don't know how you do this all the time. You nod. I'm having fun. Yeah, I'm having fun. That's awesome. You beamed at him despite being a handful. You were enjoying Nicholas. He kept you on your toes. Are you having fun, Nicholas? Yeah. Me too. What about you, George? Yeah. Derek set aside 3 paper bags in the grass, one in front of Nicholas, another next to George, and the third went to you. Derek kept the 4th lunch inside his backpack. He only pulled a water bottle out from him, and it closed the bag back up. Okay, Nicholas, get eating now with Nori and George. Nicholas clenched Derek's jeans more desperately as he whined. You're not gonna eat with me? Derek scratched the back of his head and gave a longing glance back to where he'd been practicing. Do you mind, Nori? I was hoping I'd have more time to practice. He bit his lip, hope clear on his face. He had confidence that you could handle the lunch alone. You should really eat lunch too. I'll handle it. Sure, good luck with your practice, you gave him. Yeah. Thanks, I owe you one. Nicholas's whimpering never stopped being high-pitched background noise. Derek ruffled his hair. Hey, check this out. He picked up Nicholas's soccer ball and placed it on top of his own head. Nicholas's jaw dropped theatrically as Derek fully stood up while keeping it balanced. Nicholas cheered and jumped up and down, still holding on to Derek's leg. Derek bent his knees and then popped up fast enough to launch the ball in the air. He caught it on his head again. Ha! Nicholas let go of his brother to clap. Derek grinned at Nicholas, but his gaze flickered to you for a second. The show over, Derek inclined his head and let the soccer ball drop into his hands. He held it back out to Nicholas. Make sure you eat a good lunch, okay? Then you can get back to practicing. Okay. Nicholas spoke into the soccer ball he had cuddled to his face. He had been starstruck enough that he couldn't disagree with anything his biggest brother said. Derek waved at you and George before heading off to where he had left his soccer ball, carrying only the water bottle with him. George promptly took a seat in the grass by the lunch bags. Nicholas put the soccer ball on his head. It immediately rolled off. He just tried again. He reached over to the lunches. Each bag had a clearly written name in the black marker ink. George collected his bag, you had yours, and you attempted to give the last one to its proper owner. But Nicholas showed zero interest in the bag. You imagine he would probably been more interested in the Derek's lunch, even though they probably had the same meals. George scoffed, knowing his brother was going to be difficult again. He took a sandwich from his bag. In looks alone, you guessed it. You guessed it, a sliced deli turkey, a pale-colored cheese, and some veggies. And Nicholas, clearly busy, you took his sandwich out for him. The sandwich was ham and some sort of orangey cheese, cheddar almost certainly. You offered the food directly to Nicholas, and he still didn't bite. He wanted to. I don't know what it said. How about I help you eat while you practice? Nicholas, if you want to play, then you have to eat. If you eat, I'll hold the ball in your head. Deal? Yeah. If you eat, I'll hold the ball in your head for you. Nicholas chewed on the side of his cheek while he carefully contemplated your suggestion, then focused, looked melted in a bright smile. Oh, okay, so that was easy. He gave you a determined nod, and he was ready to switch. Your fingers fanned out as you reached for the ball and pressed it down into his messy mop of hair. Nicholas cautiously released the ball, and you kept it firmly in place. He giggled ecstatically that he finally found a way to keep the ball up without using his hands. It just took another person to do it. He retrieved a sandwich and immediately stuffed a big bite into his cheeks. Chuckling, you took a glance over at what George was doing. Luckily, he didn't need a hand like his brother. He was already enjoying his packed lunch, so you decided not to squander the opportunity. You retrieved your own sandwich with your free hand and dug in. It was definitely an interesting way to enjoy a meal. Finishing the last corner of your square-shaped meal, you wondered if Mrs. Suarez had talked to one of your moms beforehand about lunch. The sandwich was made how you would have had it at home. She was either prepared or very lucky, but considering what her oldest son was like, you were guessing luck had nothing to do with it. Along with the sandwiches, there was the bags of carrots, celery, and a few cookies. Between the three of you, it wasn't long before all the snacks were gone. With nothing left to nibble on, Nicholas yawned and curled up in the grass, cuddling the soccer ball against his chest. George stood up watching his little brother fall asleep. Once he was certain that Nicholas was down for the count, he started cleaning up the trash. You admired the maturity he showed for his age. He wasn't just Derek who had the streak after all. You helped gather the trash while musing about the Suarez brothers. Derek was the oldest and who his parents relied on, while Nicholas was the baby of the family, and for a little kid, he was a force to be reckoned with. George was the one stuck in the middle. You gave him an encouraging smile. I like getting the chances to spend time together. Hey, I saw your football throws. Let's say we like the way he throws his ball. George spun around on his heel. He seemed stunned, like he wasn't sure if he imagined your compliment or not. In a couple of years, you could totally be a junior football team. He nodded, and a blush grew on his face until it reached his ears. Okay. He hurriedly went back to what he was doing before. George was embarrassed, but you also noticed there was a bounce in the step that wasn't there before. The park suddenly felt empty with Nicholas asleep. He took up a lot of space, despite his tiny size. Chuckling to yourself, you found a comfortable spot in the grass and scanned the area for Derek. You eventually caught sight of him running in distance, and even from there, you could tell that Derek was persistent about his practice. He went back and forth repeating the same set of moves, reassessing and refining his form every time. Though it wasn't long before he paused to wipe his brow with the black wristband, Derek happened to glance your way at the moment and realized that he had an audience of one. He gave a huge wave with both his hands that required. He crossed both his arms over his head, and before you knew it, Derek's strides with bringing him back over to you and his brothers. Phew, that's it. I'm gonna be done with practice. I'm back. Welcome back. So you ready to go pro now? I'm not that good. Yet. Derek shook his head and incredulously, I don't know how to say that, the confidence in your voice had his cheeks flushing just as much as the exercise. Thanks for watching, George and Nicholas. I didn't mean for that to be so long. You nodded promptly. You owe me one. It's okay, I'm happy I could help you. Think I feel like an old, tired parent now. Hey, I finally got to be a big sibling. It's okay, I'm happy to help you out. The sincerity in your voice had Derek bashful, keeping his eyes on his shoes instead. Your heart rate picked up as he chose to respond in kind. I'll probably end up saying it again, but thanks, Nora. You're a lifesaver. Next, he shifted his attention over to his brothers. George gave a little wave. He'd been waiting patiently for his big brother to wrap up the conversation with you. We're going back. George simply got up, not needing any more guidance, while Derek kneeled in the grass to nudge Nicholas out of dreamland. A single eye cracked open at first, and then they both popped open wide when he realized who was with him. Nicholas sprang off the ground, wrapping his arms around his big brother like a vice grip and nuzzled into his chest. Derek gave Nicholas's head a single pat. Practice was good today. Let's go home. Nicholas' hushed voice echoing. His brothers put a warm smile on your face. Surveying the area, you made sure that nothing would be accidentally left behind. That you breathed a sigh of relief you made it through your first time solo babysitting. Although Derek was technically still nearby the whole time, so it wasn't completely solo, but you weren't bothered by that. Derek trusted you with his siblings, and they were both still in one piece. While your leadership, no one got lost, injured, swallowed something they shouldn't have, or even declared that they hated you for an eternity, so in your book you'd say it went fairly well. The 15-minute walk back from the park passed by pleasantly. The late afternoon sun fell behind you, and your shadow soon stretched across the sidewalk. You wiggled your fingers and then exaggerated your hand movement in order to watch the shadow change. Meanwhile, next to you, Derek was finally eating his lunch. Although he had to eat his sandwich with the hand Nicholas wasn't clasping tightly onto. George entertained himself with the football again. He still carried. He periodically tossed it up in the air and caught it again. You could easily imagine how often the three of them had made this trip before, with only the three of them, but you didn't feel out of place strolling alongside the group. It felt natural. Beaming, you found your gaze settling on Derek again. You knew without a doubt that the way you felt was because of him. He was so good at making you feel welcome. In time, you made it safely back, and Derek dropped his bag on the floor with a quiet sigh of relief. Any hope he had to take things easy for a second immediately evaporated. Nicholas's joy was palpable, parroting back Derek's promise from earlier in the day. As the words dawned on him, Derek closed his eyes and breathed deeply. Yep, we are. Get ready. And that was all the approval that Nicholas and George needed. They both dashed off to their shared bedroom to get changed. Derek sluggishly opened his eyes, but his tiredness softened when he looked at you.
It's okay.
Practice is done. If you want to stay up here until your moms can come get you, that's cool. Derek gave a partial shrug and then ran a hand through his hair shyly. We don't have to go swimming again. You shook your head at the terrible idea of staying behind. I don't want to be left here by myself. I'm not gonna let you be outnumbered by George and Nicholas. What, you promised we would go to the pool again? I've been having fun. I'm not mad about being here, but I want to hang out with you. The tips of his ears burned red at your declaration, but he didn't turn away from you. He spoke cheerfully and said, "Thanks, me too, Nori." It wasn't much longer before the younger kids came running out to rejoin you and Derek. They both wore neon-colored swimsuits and had towels wrapped around their shoulders.
Awesome.
Nice job. You even remembered your floating vest, Nicholas. Derek kneeled down to make sure the safety device was properly secured. Nicholas stood tall with his chest out proudly. He didn't fear the scrutinization. I did the straps for him. Perfect, thanks. George brightened just as his younger brother had. Standing back up, Derek shifted his attention to you. Same quick change strategy from earlier? Yeah. You darted off to get changed first. Derek nodded seriously when you returned to take over for him. He reemerged a couple minutes later and diligently went over to the counter to write something down. Curious, you inched closer. Just gotta leave a note so Dad knows we are here. Then we can go. Oh, sounds good. Everything was squared away, as Derek was always sure to do, and the four of you marched right back out of the apartment for another excursion. By the time the distinct smell of chlorine tickled your nose, the sun had fallen low in the sky. You circled around some nearby lounge chairs and deemed them capable of keeping your things safe. Inspecting the gleaming water, you noticed that George and Nicholas hadn't moved towards the pool yet. Both of the little boys were watching Derek like hawks. You'd picked up on something this afternoon to know it wasn't because George didn't want to do anything without permission and Nicholas didn't want to do anything Derek wasn't doing. Here I go! And Derek himself knew it. He didn't keep them waiting. Derek offered his brothers an encouraging wave and strode over to the pool. You remain dry, nice and dry on the soft land. You can beat him in. You followed him into the water. Wait for me. Derek paused at the pool's edge and glanced over his shoulder. He beamed at you. Alright, on three. 1, 2, 3. You simultaneously leapt into the pool, making a huge splash. After a few seconds, you made your way to the surface to take a break. Derek, meanwhile, stayed under. The other Sarez sons followed. George jumped in without any hesitation, but Nicholas sped right to the edge only to come to an abrupt stop. His toes curled around the edge of the pool and his lips were pressed into a tight frown. Nicholas tipped his head and stared down at the water, clutching his hands together. He was scared to jump. Nicholas would rather the pool come the rest of the way to him, but it wasn't being a good sport. Derek and George popped up out the water with matching wide grins and droplets clinging to the tips of their hair. Neither were surprised that they were missing their baby brother. Alright. Woo! That was awesome. Nicholas's cry for help came out in a tiny impatient squeak. He began wiggling in place. Derek chuckled and swam over to the shallow spot. The 6-year-old followed closely, toddling along the edge. When his feet touched the pool's solid bottom, Derek stood up. He kindly held his arms out towards his brother. Come on, Nico. The water's fine. Trusting him completely, Nicholas let go of his fear. He took a step over the side and walked into his favorite person's hold. Derek embraced Nicholas as he dropped against his chest. Then Derek slowly lowered him closer to the water before he completely let his little brother go. Nicholas bobbed under with a small splash and broke out again in an instant like a bayou. He was bursting at the seams with excitement. Nicholas made the most of his new floating freedom by dog paddling around the shallow end. Checking on George, you noticed that he was sticking to the center of the pool. He bounced himself from the floor to the surface for the air and then pushed back down to do it all over again. He leapt all around in a circle. Derek rested an arm across the pool's edge and took a moment to watch his brothers too. You swam over to Derek and settled against the wall with him. You closed your eyes inside. The water's temperature was pleasantly warm against the cooling evening air. Derek kept his main focus on his family, though he spared a moment to tilt his head in your direction. A few beads of water trailed from his hairline down into the side of his jaw. Babysitting went as well as you thought, huh? Even better, probably. They were both really good. Neither of them bit me or anything. Perfect. Our brothers are fun. Some of the time. He chuckled at his own joke and ran a damp hand down his face to try getting at least some of the water off. The final rays of sunlight cast a warm glow on his skin, and the pool sparkled as he finally turned his attention directly towards you. You felt toastier all of a sudden, like someone had pulled the sun back up to the center of the sky. Derek's mouth turned into a usual wonderful smile. I don't know what I'd do without them. You shrugged. You nodded. I think Nicholas is way cuter than all of the Sarezas. Well, George is good, but Nicholas is the trouble with a capital T. You sound like a proud dad. Let's say I think they're great. He smirked at that. Good, because I think so too. George and Nicholas remained engrossed with their own watery adventures while you and Derek kept track of them. You were in mid-conversation when the sound of footsteps echoed off the walls surrounding the pool. Derek shot an arm out of the water and waved at the newcomer. Dad!
Good evening.
Dad? Dad? All the Sarez boys eagerly paddled over to the end of the pool where their father stood. They moved together in the water with their heads beside each other and their legs kicked out behind them like a pile of seal pups. Welcome home. Mr. Sarez's voice was sweet as he observed his children's happy faces. Eventually he spotted you as well, and he tucked his fingers in the edge of his vest with vigor. Oh, this is a pool party today. You know, a party should have the proper food. Let's order pizza for dinner tonight. Yeah. Laughing with excitement, Nicholas started smacking the palms of his hands against the water surface, making several bursting splashes. George flicked the droplets from the tips of his fingers at Nicholas in retaliation. Chuckling over the scene, Mr. Sarez brought a hand up and held onto his chin. He scratched at his beard with his thumb. Half cheese, half pepperoni for the first, correct? Yes. Nicholas threw both his arms in the air as he cheered. Mr. Sarez nodded, pleased his littlest one still had predictable taste. Okay, a meat and veggie supreme for Irene and I on the second. He settled his gaze on Derek and you for the final decision. Suggestions for the final half should be? Nori, you pick. You folded over closer to Derek as you thought about it. Um, I don't know what. Let's get all meat. Derek gave you a big thumbs up for that. So I'm full, half cheese, half pepperoni, half supreme, and half all meat.
Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you, children. I'll put in the order now. I'll come back to let you know when it's ready. But until then, continue to play. Thanks, Dad. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dad. Bye, I'll be waiting. Mr. Saras closed the pool gate behind him, leaving you kids to your fun. In Mr. Saras' absence, Derek took charge again. Alright, you heard it. Dad's ordering pizza, so I'll be here in like 30 minutes. So think fast. What's the last thing you want to do before we leave the pool? Nicholas furrowed his brow, thinking as hard as he could. He scrunched his face together in frustration when nothing came to mind. Meanwhile, George put a hand to his chin and tilted his head to the side. He stared up, off into space, as he considered the question. Let's do a splash fight. The younger Saras brothers may have been unsure or overwhelmed with how they wanted to spend their remaining pool time, but you weren't. You knew exactly what you wanted to do. Subtly angled your position in the water, carefully deciding your attack. The corner of your mouth bent. You flung a mighty splash towards Derek. He ended up with a face full of water, and he sputtered before shaking it off with laughter. As he regained composure, Derek brushed a hand down his face again to wipe some droplets away. Nori, I'm sure you're aware of what this means. Derek's stare narrowed with a fierce, amused look of determination. You matched it and gave an added, slow nod. I believe I do.
It's on.
This means war. He swiftly sent a shot of water in your direction. Nicholas cackled at your exchange, and he started to excitedly beat the water surface and sent droplets crashing in all directions. You twisted away from their attacks, and the second the water settled, you struck. Pushing your hands forward, you sent another big wave crashing towards the brothers. Derek sent splashes with both hands on each side, juggling you and Nicholas. Nicholas pulled water, cupping it in his hands, and threw it into the air. The droplets carelessly poured down on everyone. Nicholas was dangerous in this fight. He was willing to take a hit to get hit. Out of the four of you, George enacted the best defense strategy. He took a deep breath and held it while he slid under the water. Only his hands remained at the surface as they rapidly splashed in all directions. George's strategy kept you all on your toes in order to avoid his scattered shots. Whenever he came up for air, Derek made sure to be ready to take the shot. It was a grand battle. The four of you thoroughly enjoyed your time at the pool. It flew by so fast that you were surprised when you spotted Mr. Saras cruising down to the water's edge once more. Dinner's here, and even better, Mom's home. Yeah. The youngest Saras threw his wet confetti in the air one more time. Even his dad wasn't safe from it. Mr. Saras took it in stride and wiped his glasses against his vest. Derek was out of breath, but he beamed. Let's go get some food. Yeah. Mr. Saras led the way to the apartment, and the four of you kids marched with an eager spring in your step. Despite being wrapped in towels, you dripped water the whole way there. The savory smell of hot cheese and garlic crust was there to greet you when you arrived at the door. You could hear the musical words of Mrs. Saras, too.
Welcome.
Welcome home. Hi. Hi, Mom. Hi, Mom. Feeling a bit awkward and out of place, you gave a tiny wave at Mrs. Saras, didn't miss it, and her voice softened as she spoke to you first. Hello, Nora. I hope you had fun today. I did. We had lots of fun. Very good. Mrs. Saras went over there to the kitchen where the food was set on the counter. She popped the boxes open and delightedly glanced over at her husband. This was such a good idea. Thank you. Mrs. Saras dipped his head in a tiny bow. He followed that by gesturing his hand towards the food. Come get your dinner. Youngest to oldest order. Despite the order given, it was no surprise that George was the one who moved first. You figured Nicholas would wait for Derek, even if he didn't have to. George tore off a paper towel from the roll and used it to grab a slice of plain cheese. He hot-footed it back over to the entryway standing there so he wouldn't have to bring water any further into the apartment. You can go next, Nori. It'll be easier that way. The food smelled even better up close. Oh, we're gonna grab a slice of all meat. You hurried back to the entryway with your dinner. Derek went next, tiptoeing over with Nicholas at his heels. He grabbed a slice of pepperoni and passed it to Nicholas. Derek then grabbed a slice of pepperoni for himself, but instead of going to the entryway, he went to an open space on the floor. You curiously watched as Derek laid his towel on the floor and then sat on it, crossing his legs. Nicholas plopped down on the towel right beside him and and started on one of his pizza crust corners. You decided to stay with George. You decided to sit down on your own towel. Let's sit on our own towel. Well, that's a good idea. You followed Derek's example and laid your towel down on the floor with cheeks stuffed with pizza. Pizza sounds good right now. Derek gave you the cheeriest closed-mouthed smile he could. Finally, Mr. and Mrs. Suarez got their slices of pizza. They stood in the living room, in between the spots their sons had taken. How did you spend your day while we were out? We did lots of things. In between taking big bites of pizza, the Suarez family started taking turns telling stories about their day. Nicholas recounted the events of the day with the most enthusiasm, even though they were the same plot points from his brother's stories and the ones you witnessed firsthand. From his perspective, the events were almost mythically amazing. Storytelling was hungry work, so the slices didn't last long at all. The food was chipped away piece by piece until everyone was stuffed. Nicholas lay down on the floor, limbs stretched out and still wrapped up in his towel. He was completely tuckered from the day. Mr. Suarez plucked him off the floor and held him in under his arm. Bath time. Come on, Junior.
Yes, Dad.
Nicholas accepted his fate and his arms hung limply down. George crumpled up his paper towel in a ball and tossed it in the trash. He followed his dad.
Thank you.
Mrs. Suarez watched them go with gentle affection in her gaze. She patted her husband's shoulders as he passed by and then strolled over to you and Derek. And thank you for a good day's work. I appreciate you both taking care of Nicholas and George today. Her cheeriness reminded you so much of Derek's. She pointed with her thumb over her shoulder. Dad and I will take it from here. Thanks, Mom. You could see the wave of relief wash over him as clearly as the actual water you just swam in. I'll keep an ear out on the phone. Pamela said she'll call when they're on their way, when they get here, Nori. Okay. After that, Mrs. Suarez excused herself to go help get George and Nicholas ready for bedtime. When she disappeared down the hall, Derek leaned back on the palms of his hands. He lazily rolled his head in your direction. You can get dressed again. Then would you want to hang out in my room until your mom gets here? Sounds like a plan to me. You can get changed first. He stretched his legs out on the floor while you stood up. You could feel a slight ache in your muscles from today's activities. It wasn't bad. You'd given your all during your babysitting adventure. Gathering your things up in your arms, you left to get changed. It wasn't long before you and Derek went over to his room for some sibling-less free time. Derek opened his bedroom door and gestured towards you to lead the way. You went in while he followed, close behind, shutting the door once more. Your eyes widened as you scanned the small space. Usually you were outside when you hung out with Derek, so this was the first time you'd been in his room. Within reach of his neatly made bed was a bookshelf filled with novels. Various scattered soccer balls and footballs stuck out around the books and furniture. They were arranged and organized with the same care Derek put into most things he did. If there was more time, you were sure there were tons more trinkets and treasures to spot here, like a game of I Spy. It wasn't big, but Derek made the most of his small piece of the world. You quietly continued to look around. This is amazing. You felt nervous being here. Are you sure you have enough soccer balls and footballs? There's a lot of footballs and soccer balls in here. Your room is cool. This is amazing. Lightly pushing a soccer ball aside with the side of your foot, you sprung over to the other side of the room. You wanted to read the spines of the various books on the shelves. Amazing, huh? It's just my room. Oh wait, we've never hung out in my room, have we? Nope, this is all new for me. It's kind of weird to think about, but anyway, sorry. I don't have any chairs in here. You can sit in my bed if you want. Don't worry, there's a ton of space. There's tons of places to sit in the living room, so this balances things out. Derek chuckled at that. Still, he felt a little bit awkward and rubbed the back of his neck. Thanks for offering your bed, though. You laid down across his bed. You sat on the edge of the mattress. Oh, let's sit on the edge of the mattress. After the busy day you had, it was without a doubt nice to relax on something soft. Derek's expression brightened since you took him up on his offer. Derek crossed over to the foot of his bed and sat there on the end. His jaw stretched open in a huge yawn that he quickly covered with his hand. Phew, we're finally done. There was no missing the proud satisfaction burning his green eyes, but you could also consequently see the places where he was wilting. Sometimes you kind of worried about how he threw himself wholeheartedly into things all the time. You nodded along with his words. Derek, don't ask me to watch those Kims again, you teased. I hope I was at least helpful today. I'm glad that's over. How often do you babysit? It was nice. I'd say I hope I was at least helpful. Definitely. His whole demeanor lit up as he pressed the palm of his hand into the mattress and leaned slightly in your direction. An embarrassed blush rose on your cheek. Seriously, Nora, you were super helpful. Today was the easiest babysitting have ever been, and most fun. Oh, really? Yes, really. Well, maybe I'll be able to help again. Derek stretched his arms high in the air and yawned again. His eyelids drooped as he turned towards you. Gradually, the carefree warmth faded his demeanor. His face fell into a quiet frown when his hands had returned to his lap. You don't have to do it again, Nora. Whether it's a good time or bad time, it's just a lot of time. It's just a lot of time, and you have your own things to deal with. Your brows bent at that. Tilting your head, you couldn't help but think about how much of Derek's days went to his brothers. It definitely didn't seem to match how things were with your sister and you. But then, as if summoned by your thoughts about him, the bedroom door creaked open just enough to let a giggling Nicholas slip in. He threw his hands in the air. I'm dressed. With a loud thud, the door swung fully open and George marched in with an extremely annoyed scowl. He put his hands on his hips. Nicholas, we're playing in the living room, not Derek's room. George reached for his younger brother, but Nicholas scurried up onto the bed. He warily peeked at George from behind Derek's shoulders. Derek notably didn't say a single word, nor did he appear surprised about the intrusion at all. The only movement he made was a light pat on the mess of hair of Nicholas's head like usual. What wasn't usual was the distant look on his face. He had accepted that the reality at hand, but did not welcome it. Mr. and Mrs. Saras crowded into the room next. Sorry, Derek, he slipped away in a flash. Yeah? Ooh.
No more.
Come on, Nicholas, let Derek and Nori have some peace. The youngest Saras stubbornly clung on the Derek's arm, his cheeks puffed out angrily. Nicholas, go hang out with Mom and Dad. Don't you want to see them too? They missed you today. Don't you want to see Mom and Dad too? Come on, Derek. Nicholas loosened his grip as he shifted to get a better look at his big brother. Derek sighed spiritlessly. I do, but I have a friend over right now. I'll spend time with Mom and Dad and you later. Nicholas bent forward and grasped Derek's pant leg. He brought out the big guns and stared up at him with the most pitiful eyes and a matching pout. You rubbed your eyes in frustration. You sank down, feeling awkward. I'm not surprised this happened. Don't be sad. It's been a happy day. You know Derek does what he's supposed to. You could... Yeah. All focus shifted over to you in surprise, but the one you were focused on was the youngest Saras. Silently, he met your stare, and you could tell that he was mulling over your words. I know you could do it. For a second, he had a glimmer of hope that you could fix things for Derek. But as the moments passed, Nicholas still didn't budge from a spot. He grasped only tightened. Nicholas, we're reading a story right now. Nicholas angrily shook his head as she advanced across the room. She unapologetically peeled her smallest child off Derek. The young boy let out a high-pitched whine for the entire extraction. George frowned sympathetically over the confrontation while Derek winced at the noise. When the deed was done, the middle son followed his mom out the room. You could still hear Nicholas' piercing cry as he was carried away. I'm very sorry about the interruption. Continue as you were. None of us were ever here. Nicholas is kind of annoying. He gave the both of you an encouraging smile before carefully shutting the door again. It was finally silent. Derek kept an eye out until he honestly believed that there wouldn't immediately be another sibling disaster. He deemed it safe. He let out a quick sigh and attempted to choke back a harsher groan. Derek flopped back against the mattress with another huff and stretched his arms out at his sides. His arms twitched and his fingers curled into fists. There's never any privacy here. How am I still having to deal with things even after spending almost the whole day with them? You held your tongue, waiting patiently for him to get it all out. Derek muttered grievances under his breath with a harsh glare, aimed at the ceiling for a good minute and screwed his mouth shut. I'm sorry, Derek. I think you've done a really good job with everything. It's definitely rough. And I thought Elizabeth could be difficult to deal with. At least your brothers don't think. Just say I'm sorry. When you hadn't added anything else, the apology tumbled out of your mouth. There wasn't a single thing that you could do to change anything about his day-to-day, and that made you feel horrible. His head rolled over in your direction, but he didn't say a word. Instead, he surprised you with a weak smile, and you realized that just being there was enough. Evening his breath, Derek folded his arms across his chest and squeezed his eyelids shut. You could tell by the tension in his face that he was still bothered. He was thinking hard, searching for something. I can make this work. His low mumble was followed by a pause that had you intrigued, and then he jumped forward to see what he was sitting upright again. The grin you were so used to seeing was back in full force. Nori, Want to go back to the pool? Nobody's going to be there this late, and my bros are not going to be able to leave the house. We don't have to get in or anything, or even change clothes. I think it'll just be kind of a nice place to talk and that sort of thing. Avoiding your gaze, Derek nervously rubbed the back of his head. You could tell that he was trying his hardest to be nonchalant, but he wasn't exactly succeeding. I like the way you think. Alright. Derek leapt up to his feet and turned, holding a hand out for you to take. Chuckling up on your own, chuckling, you gripped his hand tightly. Derek squeezed you back and helped pull you up to your feet. Let's go. The door slowly creaked open as Derek peeked out, double checking that the coast was clear. He gave you a thumbs up. I don't see Nicholas. I think we're good. You returned his thumbs up, silently hoping that this wasn't the calm before the storm. Derek led you into the living room, where you found his dad and George sitting together on the couch. Hello. Mom has Nicholas in his room, enraptured in another exciting session of story time. Good. Nori and I were going to go down to the pool area to hang out. Is that okay? He chuckled, knowing exactly what Derek was trying to accomplish. George was perfectly happy where he was with his dad. He waved goodbye to you both. Don't keep Nori out too late. I won't. Thanks, Dad. Derek whispered with complete confidence. You gave your appreciation in an equally hushed tone. Thank you, Mr. Suarez. The last thing either of you wanted to was to alert the youngest Suarez that anything fun was happening without his knowledge, so you both silently slipped out of the apartment. Once you were free from the condo's walls, Derek's excitement was palpable. He picked up the pace and raced to the pool gate. For the third time in a single day, you and Derek stepped foot on the condo's complex's private pool deck. But you soon realized you hadn't seen everything it had to offer yet. Under the cover of the night, the pool was completely aglow with lights set into the bottom. The bright blues struck you as inviting breaths of steam drifted off the top of the water, whispering how warm it was. The closed-in space was clear of any other people, and it had been like that for a while, considering the stillness of the pool. Not a single ripple of disrupted its aquamarine surface. Here, you'd have peace and privacy. Derek was drawn to the water like a moth to a flame. He wordlessly rolled up his jeans and tugged off his sneakers and socks, then dunked his feet right into the pool, up in the middle of his calf. He stretched and wiggled his bare toes in the comfortable embrace of the heated pool. On a summer night, you joined Derek at the edge. Let's dip our... I don't want to dip my feet. Let's dip our hands. It was as pleasant as its sparkling appearance promised. The water had none of the slight chill that the air did. It was the perfect amount of heat. Derek wrapped both of his hands around the smooth tile edge and tilted back. One of his legs kicked up as his back drifted down, like his upper lower body were each one side of a seesaw. He grinned playfully at you. So, what were we talking about? I can imagine to put words together on the spot. Well, I don't remember. Oh well, it's not your fault. He solemnly brought his torso back up until he was hunched over the water. He stared down at it. All his lightheartedness had disappeared in an instant. That kind of makes the whole interruption thing even more sucky, though. There wasn't any heart in it, but Derek managed to chuckle. Sorry for making my problems your problems. He dug his fingers into the side of his hair, scratching at it in frustration. I don't even know what my problem is. They came in my room for 5 seconds. I'm so dramatic. You leaned closer to show you were that you were here to listen. It annoyed me. I don't even live here. You deal with a lot of problems. Nicholas is dramatic. You're mild. You joked. Derek, that's not dramatic. And it wasn't the only thing that happened today. Yeah. Derek crossed his arms tight and pushed them against the top of his legs. The blue water rippled around him. As his legs moved against the pool wall, he pressed his heels into it. The pressure that had been only on the inside was coming out. It's just, the thing is, Nicholas and George need me all the time, and my parents need me because they need me. I don't want to let them down, I really don't, but it's hard. Every day it's like I'm going to mess up and disappoint somebody. He bit his tongue and released his limbs from the locked position they had been stuck in. He couldn't scrub the furrow away from his brows. Everyone has stuff to worry about. It's not just me. Mom has to take care of them way more than I do, and Dad works a job pretty much the entire day. I admire you. You don't have to brush yourself off. Your family is lucky to have you. So what if they think that you still deserve to be happy? It's not fair for you to think that. You place a supportive hand on his shoulder. Yeah, so what if they have things that you deserve to be happy? He went silent, unmoved. Nicholas was the one who caused trouble, but somehow Derek had made himself to be the bad guy. It was upsetting. But Derek wasn't anywhere close to really being grown up. Of course he couldn't be perfect, even though he acted like he thought he should be. Derek, remember when your dad first came to the pool and you, George, and Nicholas were all excited? You were just like your brothers. Even if you're in charge sometimes, you're still your parents' kid. You don't have to act like an adult, especially not with me. Finally, slowly and carefully, Derek dared to glance at you again. Thanks, Nori, for saying all that. His shoulders squished inward to frame his lowered head. He looked so much like a hopeful puppy that he could even hopeful puppy that he could give even Nicholas a run for his money in the adorable face department. It really doesn't bother you that I complain, and sometimes hanging out with me means helping out with two other kids. For all the confidence Derek had displayed, when push comes to shove, he was pretty insecure about himself and what you thought of him. You nodded seriously. I'll babysit as many times as you need. Derek, I love hanging out with you no matter what. That's right, as long as you don't mind dealing with Elizabeth when you visit me. Not at all, complain away. I love hanging out with you no matter what. Derek showed his full face to you. It was all lit up by the light shining through the water. The smile on his face was just as glittering. I don't ever want to be a pain, but it's really cool to have a friend who doesn't mind listening to me being there. He didn't say that lightly. He only wanted to let himself be there for you and everyone else, but being somebody Derek could count on was special. His cheeks flushed just admitting it, but with the way your heart fluttered, you were sure your face was a match. Then his eyebrows furrowed mischievously. Just like that, he catapulted right off the tile edge into the pool. You gasped, as if you were the one who suddenly got plunged into the water. Derek burst through the surface with a loud gasping laugh. This water is great. Are you gonna get in trouble? You shook your head at Derek's spontaneous swim. You broke out into laughter. Are you okay? Let's laugh. Everything's gonna be good, Nori. I'm not an adult. That was true. You watched him enjoy the water. You splashed. You lowered yourself. Yeah, let's go in the pool. In an instant, you were hit with an explosion of bubbles as you sunk down in the water. You waited until you felt the pool floor, then kicked off and popped your head out of the water. Woo! Derek pumped both his fists in the air. His black wristbands drooped further down his arm, heavy from being soaked. The two of you paddled through the water together. The added weight of your clothes made you both winded pretty quickly. That only amused Derek more. Laughter and sloshing water brought once stagnant pool life. The stagnant pool to life. You and Derek still had a place to yourself and made it the absolute most of it. But eventually Derek crawled up the stairs out the pool. His baggy clothes poured out many waterfalls with every step he took on land. Derek looked especially tiny with his drenched jersey. Sorry, hold on. With his drenched, I have dogs and they bark. His drenched jersey draped over his frame. He waited there at the top of the steps for you to catch up, being dripping gentleman. You held the rail with each step up the stairs. You felt the weight of your soaked clothes pressing down on you more. You got a thumbs up from Derek when you made it out. Then he carefully tipped his head to the side and tapped his hand against his ears to get the water out. Alright, time to face the music. Having to go home damped Derek's mood far more than the water on his body. He could do anything here, and the wide open pool is with you as his only companion. Going back to his family came with countless expectations and responsibilities, but it still had to be done. Yeah. You gave a small nod, readying yourself for whatever might happen when you arrive at the Saras' condo. Without another word, Derek collected the shoes and you left the little oasis behind. You held each other's hand, the two of you hand. Let's hold hands. Okay. His slippery fingers gripped you as tightly as they could. When you made it to the front door, Derek used a key from his pocket to open it. He hadn't forgotten to bring it despite leaving under rushed and uneasy circumstances. Derek stood there in the front of the unlocked door just staring at it. Practically preparation was his forte. Making himself ready for bumps in relationships was not. You didn't do anything wrong, Derek. You got nothing to feel bad about. They do. Remember that. Yeah. He took in a huge breath through his nose and turned the knob. The living room was quiet when you went inside. George and Mr. Saras had moved over to the kitchen and were busy putting together a puzzle. Mr. Saras' shoulder blocked your view so you couldn't see what the picture was supposed to be. Mrs. Saras and Nicholas were nowhere in sight. You guessed they were still in the younger boy's bedroom. It was strange not to have someone cheer and shout when Derek walked through the door. There was a feeling of absence. "We're back," he announced himself with an absolute lack of enthusiasm. He might as well have been calling off bingo numbers to an empty room. Mr. Saras lifted his head and turned to face the both of you. At least the same time, he eagerly pushed his chair away from the counter.
I see.
Thank you for coming home. The greeting he gave was so normal that it was weird, considering how you and Derek each brought a bucket full of water absorbed into your clothes. George offered a typical family greeting of his own, not taking his eyes off the puzzle. He was either focused or avoiding the awkwardness.
Welcome back.
Derek silently poked a bare big toe onto the prickly entryway doormat. The mess Derek's foot was making was too much for the little mat to contain. Water leaked from the edges. Derek's attempt to face his family was completely equally smoothly. The bright pleasantries of Mr. Cyrus's face softened into warmth. He followed through on the motion. He started and got out of his chair. He crossed the living room to stand with the two of you in the front door. My hard-working son is always in demand. Our family needs to learn how to share, especially Nicholas. The last part was said with a little chuckle. Derek didn't smile from the compliment, but he did start to blush.
Excuse me.
Excuse us. A new voice came from the hall. Mrs. Cyrus stood there with her hands on her hips, peeking from behind the skirt of her dress was a distinct, spiky nest of brown hair. Now that you're here, someone has something he wants to say to his big brother. Her words got George to actually turn away from the puzzle and watch the scene, but Nicholas remained hidden. Her encouragement wasn't enough. As always, he was waiting for Derek. You didn't need to tell Derek that, though he knew it was far better than you. He shifted his weight on his feet and gave Nicholas an invitation.
Okay.
What did you want to say? Nicholas darted out from behind his mom with enough speed to flutter her dress. His tiny feet thundered over the floor until he came to an abrupt stop right in front of his favorite person. He had to lean his head all the way back to look at Derek in his eyes. Derek looked down to meet his gaze. Nicholas resisted the urge to hug him and instead clutched at the collar of his own shirt.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, that's your room. From how much Nicholas struggled to explain his apology, it was obvious he wasn't at a point where he understood why being together at all times wasn't a completely fantastic idea. All that had gotten through was that he had upset his brother, and that in return upset him. Nicholas bit his lip and moved his hands to pull at the bottom of his shirt instead of the top. The best he could come up with next was simply repeating himself. Sorry. Derek's lip quirked just a little bit. He patiently listened to his little brother. You should say sorry to her too. Nori helped you a lot today too. Nicholas instantly twisted his head towards you and echoed the word. He was very serious. Sorry, Nori. You had to look away at the shyness. You smiled at him. I appreciate that you apologize. You apologize. No worries. Thank you, Nicholas. No worries. Nicholas hopped up on the pads of his feet. As a nervous but hopeful energy came over him, your reaction was the first positive sign he'd gotten. The smallest Cyrus glanced between you and Derek unsurely. He let his shirt go and balled his hands into fists. I'm sorry, Derek. I'm sorry, Nori. Nicholas put everything he had into willing whatever problem he had caused to be fixed, and to people not feeling bad anymore. The emotional display of regret moved someone in the room to speak.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, too. Derek snorted a laugh at the unexpectedness of the interjection. What did you even do? I don't know. The middle child looked down at the puzzle in front of him again, but he was staring through the pieces as if they weren't there. He murmured just barely loudly enough to hear from where you guys were standing. You and Nori had to watch me today, too. Derek's hesitancy completely crumbled, and his usual... Where's our mom? Sorry. And his usual familial dynamic came back into full force. Oh, George, you don't have to apologize for that. I like to have some time by myself or with my friends, but I never want to stop having my little bros. Nicholas's massively widened eyes sparkled. For the first time since they were reunited, he carefully reached out to Derek and gripped his soaking wet jeans. Derek reached down to gently pat his baby brother's head, as he did probably every day. Neither boy cared that this time their hands were damp. Instead, they both smiled at the other with unwavering affection. No matter what fissions happened, it was inevitable that it would end that way because they both loved their family equally and deeply. Another person took a turn to cut in as Mr. Cyrus spoke with vigor. Derek? Nori, let's race. What? Derek chuckled at your confusion and switched his head pat into a full-on hair ruffle. Nicholas giggled excitedly along with his brother. Dad is asking us to play a video game. An old kart racer he likes. Yes, and I will win it. Derek's dad cheerfully tack that on. It couldn't be forgotten clearly. George could be player 4. Mrs. Suarez was the only one who truly kept her distance during the reconciliation between Derek and Nicholas, but now she joined the rest of the family. When she was close enough to you and Derek to whisper, she pressed a hand to the corner of her mouth and winked conspiratorially. I'll give Nico an unplugged controller. Derek grinned at that point and shifted into giving the longest strands of Nicholas's hair a friendly tug. He didn't accept the invite immediately. He included you in the discussion. What do you think, Nori? Are you kidding? I think we should race. He nodded at you and turned to answer his father. Alright, let's race. Derek's mom encouraged you and Derek with her words and Nicholas with his hands, taking him by his shoulders. This time she wouldn't be letting him get away from her. We'll get changed, we'll plug it in so it's ready by the time you're back. Nori, you're welcome to use my or Mr. Suarez's pajamas if Derek doesn't have anything you can borrow. It'll be big, but it's better than nothing. Thanks, Mom. Derek's mood continued to be buoyed by the support of his parents, and he left to go get changed while walking as lightly as possible as he could in his wet clothes. You followed the watery footprints he left behind to dry off to. He did a quick change while you waited with the towel wrapped around you to minimize your clothes dripping. He came out of his room wearing black sweats with a matching top. Now that he wasn't spilling water everywhere he offered to get you something to wear. Derek rattled off what kinds of pajamas his family had on hand. He apologized twice for the fact that he was so much shorter than you and had nothing you could fit. You reassured him that it wasn't his fault. You were the one who chose to get wet when you didn't have an extra pair of your own clothes. Ultimately, you borrowed a button-down TJ shirt and pants from Mr. Let's get a gown. It was silky and smelled like flowers. The flowing dress reminded you of your own mom's that brought you comfort even though it wasn't exactly your size. What mattered most was that you were finally warm and dry. Your skin still had lingering goosebumps from your dip in the pool. Derek gave you a friendly thumbs up. He was nothing but polite about your outfit situation. He bundled up the pile of wet clothes and carried them off to the laundry. He spoke over his shoulder as he walked as fast as he could with dripping clothes in his arms. I'll get you your stuff back the next time I visit, okay? Okay. As promised, the Suarez's dark purple GameCube was fully connected with the 4 controllers plugged in by the time you and Derek strolled into the living room wearing your new digs. A familiar shout filled the whole room. Alright. All was right in the world. Oh, Nicholas. Yep, Nico, I'm here. Mrs. Suarez was on the carpet with Nicholas in her lap. She already passed him a controller and he was having a blast pressing the clicky buttons, despite the fact that they did nothing except make a little noise. George and Mr. Suarez took seats on the couch. George tucked himself closely against his father so the two were only taking up one side. The other half of the couch was reserved for you and Derek. Derek dove in the spot next to George. He got settled in nicely against the plush back of the couch and folded his legs up across the cushion. You got in the final place and relaxed against the arm. George passed one controller to Derek, which Derek gave you, then he handed over a second, which Derek kept. Mr. Suarez filled you in on a decision he and his second son had made. Junior and I are on a team you and Nori could play together. What do you think? Derek tilted his head your way. He lifted his shoulders and added on to Dad's briefing. It's a double racer. One drives the other. It's a double racer. One drives, the other controls the items. You shrugged acceptantly. This is gonna be good. You smiled understandably. I love that game. Sounds cool. This is gonna be good. Definitely. It's me and you then. The deal was sealed. Packs had been made. George perked up and shook Mr. Suarez's arm. Hey, Dad. We're Team Suarez. Yes, we are. Derek's fingers were on the buttons, and he was leaning over his crossed legs in anticipation for the game to begin. He replied unbothered, "Cool for you guys." While his gaze still glued to the TV, a cheeky grin pulled at his lips. Derek spoke one more thing under his breath that was meant just for him, but you were sitting close enough to catch it. "I don't mind being Team Cavern." He giggled sweetly. Being squished in a couch so close to him felt even warmer. All 4 players making up the 2 teams chose their character carts, positions, and the track set. To start, Derek and Mr. Suarez were driving. You and George had item launching duty. 3, 2, 1. The carts launched across the starting lines with both drivers getting an extra boost. Team Cavern and Team Suarez were off down the colorful jungle road. There would be 3 laps before the race was over. Lap 1 was a frantic race for the top spot. The carts were neck to neck, and each over every hill and around each curve, neither getting ahead or falling behind. Attacks were constantly exchanged and buttons were pressed at rapid speeds. That included Nicholas as he watched the race and tried to use the controller the way everyone else was. You wondered which part of the game he thought he was impacting. By lap 2, Team Cavern had taken a strong lead. Almost nothing came from Sara's camp could reach your cart. Once he passed the line to start lap 3, Derek was cocky enough to bring out the smack talk. Thought you were gonna win, Dad. Mr. Sara's expression was perfectly content. More than that, it was serene. And it was. With a calm face, Derek's father carefully reached across George and then in a blink of an eye, locked his large hand around the comparatively tiny controller Derek held. Hey! The cart you and Derek shared went out of control, careening off the dirt patch in the pit. Y'all, this is a long fucking part. You had to wait for the game to finish you out and place you back on the road. Team Sara's rolled on right past. See? I'm winning now. Derek's dad was boldly unapologetic. He grinned like a child who just found out you could get a hole-in-one at putt-putt golf if you dropped the ball in the hole. You're cheating now. Derek sputtered with laughter, made it equal parts amusement and disbelief. He yanked his arms toward his chest to fight for freedom, but Mr. Sara's grip was unmovable. Running interference, huh? From a distance, Miss Sara mused over the situation that had begun to unfold. Her husband stole a look at where she had been sitting. She was gone, leaving only Nicholas on the floor. Mr. Sara lifted one thick eyebrow and pressed the other lower. He could only puzzle over what it might mean until it all became clear by the world going dark for only him. Derek's mom had crawled over behind the couch, popped up from behind him, and slipped her fingers over Mr. Sara's glasses. He was caught completely off guard. Ah. His father startled from the shock of surprise attack that wasn't committed by himself. Yeah, Mom. Derek hadn't gotten his controller back. Mr. Sara was stubborn in his own hold, but his dad was just as incapacitated as the driver. Yeah, Mom. An echo of Derek's cheer came from behind. All the excitement in the air had stirred a fire in Nicholas. He wasn't just playing with an off controller anymore. He crawled on all fours at a rapid pace until he reached the couch and launched himself right at his dad's stomach. It was powerful enough that Mr. Sara sprung forward and Mr. Sara's hands were yanked off. Oof! But Derek's controller was finally freed. Mr. Sara had to let go of both controllers to catch his squirming child. Nicholas would not be contained. He climbed up over his dad's shoulders and wrapped his arms around Mr. Sara's face. In sweet justice, the Team Sara's cart flew off the bridge and in the abyss below. Yeah, Nicholas. George placed his own controller in his lap with a shake of his head and a smirk. Team Sara's wasn't winning this race. Derek rolled his shoulders and poked a tongue out at the corner of his mouth in concentration. He was back in business. The Team Cavern cart course corrected a race towards the finish line on the final lap. The youngest Sara's hugged all four of his limbs around the dad even tighter from the thrill of seeing Derek speed his car around the track. Yeah. Items weren't needed now, but you were just as invested in watching your cart make the last stretch, and Derek brought it home, crossing the finish line. We won! Sorry, I had to get a drink. Derek threw his fist in the air, pumped them back down to his chest, turned to you with a palm held out for you to smack. Excuse me. I mean, I feel like I've been reading for hella. You clapped his hand, you hugged him, you gave him a thumbs up, you used your hand to slightly cover. Fuck it, hug him. You ignored the hand and flung your arms around his neck. He squeezed you back, pressing his face into your shoulder. You were victorious. We won. Nicholas sent his arms up towards the sky, a perfect imitation of his eldest brother. Mr. Sara used this opportunity to collect his son from off his shoulders and place Nicholas in his lap. He pet his son's hair, and he laughed, breathless, but full of joy. Next race. Next race. This time, Derek repeated the phrase, still raring to go, but that was naturally followed by the original copycat. Nicholas clapped gleefully and snuggled up against his seat on his father's chest. Next race. George picked up his abandoned controller once more. His voice was quieter, but no less sincere. Yeah, next race. In all the commotion, you'd completely forgotten that you've switched to the driver role to take over for Derek at any time. George could have too, but for his dad, but you were glad it went the way it did. Team Cavern got its win with the assistance of Team Pile drivers Nicholas and Mrs. Sara, and the game was just getting started. Next race. You couldn't help joining the pattern. It got big smiles from the family.
Wow.
Isn't this a real party? There's still pizza in the fridge. Who wants leftovers? The suggestion of food riled Nicholas up even more. He clambered over his dad's shoulders for the second time, tugging his beard and accidentally knocking his glasses off. Mr. Suarez wheezed out a chuckle. Yo, I didn't know it was gonna be this long. Nicholas stared out from over the couch in the kitchen. He wanted that pizza, but he couldn't be the first to ask. He looked to the other Suarez boys. Oh, I will have leftovers, he said just for Nicholas' sake. Pizza please, I do. I'll just look over them. I'd eat a slice, thanks. I'd eat a slice. George and Mr. Suarez chimed in on their own request. Can I have some, Mom? I would like some pizza, my beloved wife, who never turns against me. She snickered with a glint in her eyes. Of course, start the game, I heated up. All four of the Suarez men spoke in unison. Thanks, Mom. Thank you, too. You're welcome. The players all resumed their positions and took up their tools, slightly sweaty GameCube controllers. When the second race started, the grin on Derek's face was one of the most radiant you'd seen the whole day. His dad, mom, and brothers, too, really knew how to make Derek happy. That brought a smile to your face, too. From getting a window into Derek's life and from what you knew from your own, spending every day with the same people could take a lot of patience, but there were a lot of perks, too. Your time with the Suarez's household ended with family food and fun. There wasn't much more you could have asked for. Alright, so the DLC responsible was a lot. Definitely not reading another one right now, but you know, I'll get back to y'all with, you know, all this other DLC. Thank you for listening. See you next one.